Hello, everyone. My name is Douglas James. I am here with Minute Tech, and I'm going to be showing you how I set up my Next.js web apps with styled components, Vercel, and GitHub. So jumping right into it, the first thing you're going to want to do is install Visual Studio Code. I picked the Insiders version because there's a syncing feature that allows you to sync your settings and plugins across your VS Code instances on different computers. And use VS Code as an IDE. So it's essentially like a notepad that allows you to edit your code. And it has styling of that code. And it also has like a built-in terminal at the bottom. So you can like start up your server and such. The next thing you want is Node.js, which is for a Node Package Manager, NPM. And you usually run this in order to install your libraries, your third-party libraries for an app, so you don't have to build everything from scratch. And it's also kind of like a server instance as well for your Next.js app. It's kind of the baseline. And so I would install the pre-built installer for Windows. I mean, obviously you change it for Mac if you're on Mac. I usually do the current version, and you click download and go through that setup process. And part of that setup process, you're going to want to install pretty much everything that it wants you to do by like it's recommending you to do. Some of those things include like Chocolatey, and I think Git is also included in that. But if it's not, and you boot up your Visual Studio Code and it asks you about Git, which is for pretty much how you manage your changes on your app, you would go ahead and download that here, as well as obviously a Mac OS version as well. And the last thing is GitHub Desktop, which is different than Git, but somewhat connected. But this is more of a GUI, general user interface like this for you to edit and manage the code that you're changing. So if like I make a bunch of changes to my code base, I can see what those changes are before I push them to the main or my branch, whatever I'm working on, so that I can work better with other people, so people can see what I've changed, and we can track the changes that have been made and roll things back. And it's just really easy to work and code this way. So it's necessary in the industry. So go ahead and download that. And then once you have those items downloaded, you're going to want to boot it up. So this is my instance of GitHub. But before you do, well, I guess if you don't have a GitHub account, you're going to want to create one as well. And then you're going to sign in. There's going to be a sign in screen when you open your GitHub app. Go ahead and sign in. And then once you sign in, you're going to want to go ahead and create a new repository here. So we'll name this one Doug Test. But we're going to want to, I usually like doing dashes as separators. So we'll do Doug Test. And then no description for now. You're going to just put it at your local path, which I usually just put it in documents, and it always defaults under GitHub. I would initialize it with a README. And so a README is just like what someone should be reading before or after they set up their app. And it's pretty much just like an overview, some documentation on what your code base is and how to use it. Git ignore. We usually, if you can find node in here, that's helpful. I'm pretty sure this gets overwritten, but essentially a git ignore is when you're pushing changes to your repository to GitHub, it will ignore certain files that might be too big or aren't really necessary for the online code base to store. For example, third-party libraries, when you have a list of what those third-party libraries are in your code base, but you don't necessarily have them all downloaded and pushed to your repository, because you're just going to be grabbing those whenever you clone the repository. And cloning the repository is when you pretty much download or put the repository on your GitHub app so that you can interact with it. I'm pretty much cloning it here, except creating it is before you clone it. So you want to put git ignore anything you don't want to share, even like env files, which are called, which are environment files or environment variables. So there's a file in your repository typically that you want to ignore so that you don't push sensitive API keys and things that are specific to your app that maybe somebody working with you can grab from, like SendGrid for emails, or from AWS for how it connects to your server, so things like that. License, usually not important for just something like this, so you can ignore that. So go ahead and create it. And then once you have it created, you're going to publish it. But for now, since there's nothing really there, let's just go ahead and open it up. So when you open it up, it's going to open it up in Visual Studio Code. And this is, I believe, a setting that you need to set, maybe somewhere even in like your settings here, on making sure that this open Visual Studio Code is being used as your default external editor. Yeah, look, select your editor option. So you'd click there, but I think pretty sure it's somewhere up in the options. So once you have that open, you can see this is the start page. You can see our gitignore file. It's picking a couple things that we're ignoring. All this is just default to usually Node.js apps, but this will be gone when we create a Next.js app specifically. And Next.js is technically a React app, but it's a newer version of it created by the company Vercel, which is also the same company that we're going to be hosting a lot of our backend infrastructure on. So let's go ahead and open up the terminal. And so to do that, I do Control tilde, or like the backtick right above tab, or you can do terminal, new terminal right there. Well, actually that's different, but it will open up this, and you can open up another instance here just by clicking plus, and you can see a couple instances there. But this is our essentially a terminal window from Windows. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do npx, which is a like form of npm, Node Package Manager. And we're going to do create next app. And then we're going to just name it Doug test, just as, and this should match exactly the GitHub name of the repository you had. So it makes sure that it's tied perfectly to what you're doing. So go ahead and click enter. And this is going to take a sec. And once it's done, we're going to do yes. We're going to do pick TypeScript. So TypeScript is pretty much a superset of JavaScript. And all it is essentially a more type-safe way of writing your JavaScript, so that if you, or especially when you're working with other people, you get errors that tell you, oh, this is imported wrong, or this variable name isn't expected, so that you don't make mistakes in the future. It just kind of helps you write your code so that you're not writing outside the bounds of how the app is structured. And I'll kind of dive into that more when we open up the app. ESLint is pretty much TypeScript's way of going over your code and giving you that feedback, telling you this is wrong or this is right. So yes, we're going to do that. Tailwind is a way to style your app. Some people love it. I don't really use it. I use something called styled components, which we'll set up. The source directory is like, I think the old way of doing things, or sorry, the new way of doing things. So we're going to do yes on that. I don't know why it's not defaulted for me, but so a source directory is essentially where your app source is going to be sitting. So we're going to do yes. Would you like to use app router? Yes. This is the new Next.js 13 way of structuring your app. Would you like to customize by default? No, we're not going to customize anything. We're going to leave it defaulted. And this is going to set us up and install all these dependencies here. These are the starting dependencies. React, like I said, Next is a superset of Next is a superset of React. React DOM is just how you interact with the DOM of a web browser. TypeScript, like I said, and these are all your types. So with TypeScript, TypeScript needs to understand what is what's expected from React or from Node. So these are the types, or kind of the definitions, almost like a dictionary. So if you're like writing in Grammarly, for example, or in Word, and it gives you a little squiggle underline, says that's not how you spell that. It knows that because it's looking at this dictionary of what Node expects, what React expects, what React DOM expects. And so you'll install the types for every third-party library that you are using, so that it knows, okay, when I'm using this library, how do I how do I, what is my node expecting me to write so that you don't make mistakes. So this is all done, added a bunch of packages, no vulnerabilities, which is great. Sometimes you'll see vulnerabilities when you install things. Not a big deal, but you can always do npm run audit, or sorry, audit fix. And that will automatically fix things that it can without breaking things. But we won't worry about that for now. So as you can see, if I go ahead and right click, reveal in Explorer, you can see here my GitHub. So we have Doug test, that's the one we made, but then there's also a Doug test inside of it. And look, we have all this stuff here. So what we're going to do really quick, there's probably a better way to do this, but the way I typically do it is I just create two of it the same name. And then I go in here into the nested folder. I cut all this and then put it all out here. And then we replace anything. And the only thing it's replacing is the README. So cool. Now we have that in the right spot. We can delete this old empty folder. And you see our GitHub now shows us everything that was added. And this is just the default for starting up a Next app that it gives you. So we're going to go ahead and close that. And we don't have it open anymore. I don't think. Maybe I did. Open in Visual Studio Code. So we're going to open this. And so look, now the GitHub, or sorry, git ignore is a little different. This is specific for Next.js. These are things that for Next.js we want to ignore. And so you might add things to here, like for example, different env files that you name differently. Like env, you might have one for production. And then you might have one for development, for how it connects to your APIs and your third-party apps that you don't want to be pushing to GitHub, because then it's exposed and someone could access it could be exposed and someone could access your sensitive data. So we'll just add that just for clarity. So this is your app structure over here. Again, you have your README, and you would write something specific for your app so someone can jump in and use your app. And then you have your TypeScript configuration, just how it's checking things, and you might need to change things depending on your certain setup. Package.json is going to be what packages is your Next app using. So you have your dependencies here. And so all we have is React and React DOM and then Next, which is Next.js. And you see the version we have, and you see dev dependencies, which dev dependencies are similar to dependencies, except these are only needed in the local environment and your development environment. So you don't need them when you push to production. So these will not be pushed to production. So it saves you a little space. And the reason TypeScript isn't used in production is because TypeScript always compiles out to JavaScript. TypeScript is kind of like a layer on top that just checks things. And then once it's checked, it runs JavaScript as normal. And same thing with your types and ESLint. Those are all connected to TypeScript. So that's why they're in the dev dependency spot. You could theoretically put everything in dependencies, but it's just more efficient to split it up so you're not pushing everything to your production. Package.lock JSON is just essentially a copy of this, and it just happens whenever you npm install, which whenever you clone a new repository, the node modules that are essentially what are defined here. So like next, this package will be put into here. You'll see if I go on to N, there's a lot in here because these all are dependent on each other. Like next might have minimist, merge, all of these other things. And you don't really need to be privy to all this. I'm just showing you what's going on. But next is in here because it's defined here, and all of the things that it depends on are also in here. When you clicked npm install, when you run npm install, it's going to install all of the things. And if I even run it, it's gonna just say that up to date, you're good to go. Because when you did npx create next app, it went ahead and did that for us. So moving back up here, you have your next config, which some things are set in here and they can be complicated, but essentially these are specific configurations that you might want to set for your app. And then git ignore, we went over. Git attributes, I don't really look at. Same thing with the ESLint setup. So this is the bulk of your app. Your actual app is the source and the app folder. So the app is going to be our actual app that's running. And so you'll see you have your favicon in here, which the favicon is a little icon that in a browser pops up right there. For example, you have your CSS here, and this is just your globals. And then your layout is kind of where your app starts. This is the beginning of everything, right? So this is the first file that your next app looks at. And you see where it making some imports. This is enter is just for fonts coming from Next and Google. So you're just importing an initial font to use. This metadata is like the title in a browser at the top. It tells you like what the app is. You could change this to Doug Test description, Doug's Test app. This is like what pops up in Google when you Google an app, or sorry, Google a website. It will come up with the title and then the description underneath it, so you know what the app is or what the website is. And so you have your root layout here. So there's only one of these in your whole app. And you have your HTML, which is your standard setup. And so once you have this, you have your children inside the body. And so you're going to want to keep this as is like that. And you can add things accordingly here. So the children are going to be everything underneath this app. And so the way that it's structured is you can essentially have nested the routes for your pages are going to be nested in your app. So let's just create a couple test folders. So like you're going to have about page, right? It's pretty typical. And in your about page, you're going to have a page.tsx. So I guess I'll jump over to the page.tsx. And TSX stands for TypeScript, and then the X stands for kind of React's way of signifying this is a component file. So this is a component, this page component, and it's called home. So just to make this more simple, let's go ahead and actually, I'm going out a little bit out of order, my bad. Let's go ahead and just start this up real quick just to show that it works. So we're going to do npm run dev, and that's what starts your local host, your dev environment. And so you're going to go to this in your web browser, and you can see, I'm going to open this up, and this is the default. This is what Next just gives you as your default, some quick styling. But if I go back to here and I remove all of this default, so we have just our app, then we can go ahead, even remove the styles and the imports. And we can even just call this div. We don't even need to call it main. And we can say an h1 tag, Doug test. And we can do a paragraph tag and you can see my Copilot's trying to Doug's test app for people. Sweet. And then we're going to save this as well. And we made a little changes there, and boom, there you go. And there's a black background as well. And so I don't remember setting that, but if we were to go into our modules, which is pretty much a CSS subgroup for just this page. I don't really use it that much, but it's essentially a way to only apply your CSS to a certain sub page. So I'm going to delete all this because I actually don't need any of this. Actually, I'm going to delete this whole file. So I'll delete that whole file, and we can go ahead and delete this too, because I don't really need that. It's probably going to give me an error because I just deleted something that was imported, which is right here. So we'll delete that. I'm actually going to delete all of this. I don't even want this at all, just so it's nice and simple. So if I go back to my app, you see my fonts changed. Now it's Times New Roman, which is the default. And then we have your paragraph tag. And so it changed a little bit too, because we had styling that applied like no padding to this. So now we're at the baseline setup, which is great. So once we're here, we can just show the about page. So this is currently an empty folder. But if I were to create a new file, and we called it page.tsx, right? And this can be our about page. So if we go back to this page and we just copy this, this can actually be named page. I like to name it just page so it's not confusing. And then we did about. We can name this test home so people know that it's the home page. And then we do about, and then we do about Doug and his testing. We save and we go back. Well, there's no links for us to get there. So we could create one, or we could just type in up here about, boom. And there we are. So this is a simple way just to route into your app. So we have our about page that's nested on the base level. So I could go ahead and add another page. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add it inside about, maybe about company, right? And then I could do another page. I could just copy these existing ones and just go in here. And then I rename it, and let's do page. Again, it has to be named page.tsx in the folder. And this name will be what the sub, and we'll do about company. And this is giving me a error because it's a reserved HTML value. About Doug's test company. So now if I do about/company, you can see that it's now nested within that value, which is great. So that just shows you you can start nesting things and setting them up that way. One thing I like to do is I like to create a lib folder here at the top level. And this is going to be your variables that might show up. Maybe like your utility functions that are used throughout the app that aren't necessarily like about a page. So, or in a page or something. And we're going to go ahead and look at the public folder, which we haven't quite looked at yet. And that is just, this public folder is essentially anything that's publicly accessible on the baseline of your app. So this is where you're going to put like static images. So I might have, and you can see here they have the Next SVGs and Vercel SVGs, but I like to put assets here. And then I like to put like PDFs or fonts, things like that. That it's okay if somebody like obviously sees the public font for something or a public PDF, maybe like the terms and conditions. We're going to have that here. I'm not going to add anything there, but you get the point. And then anything in this public folder will generally also be used for SEO. So like sometimes people will put like an OG image here, which is essentially just a open graph image, so that people, when they're visiting the site, or they're sharing the site rather, to a social media platform, it will pop up in that little like preview box with an image. So we have that. And then let me just take a look at my notes here. Yeah, I mean, so this is pretty much your standard setup, but I think we should just show installing. I don't actually know why this is. Let's see if I refresh the page, if it will. Yeah, not throwing error. Good. So we're going to go ahead and let's add a styles folder. In here, we're going to have our test.ts styles, and we're going to want to import our styling. And so the way I use my styling is I like to use styled components. And so components are a React thing, which this isn't a lesson necessarily on React, it's on Next. And so you can go ahead and look at tutorials on React, but essentially a component is this. This is a component. This is a page component specifically, and this can be imported somewhere else. Next.js uses this specifically, but if I were to just quickly make a component, what I like doing is I like putting my components in a folder here. I just do components, and this might be like a header, for example. So let's make that. We'll do, I'd like to call it under main, and then we can also do like misc. I'll add here. Oops, not a folder. A file. We can do header.tsx. So all your components need to be TSX ending. And you can see there's a little React component there, or a little React icon. So I have a hotkey that RFC, yeah, React functional component that you can start with. And so I just typed, I have a, I don't even know what this plugin is, but essentially I can just type RFC and it will come up with this. You can also just go here, copy and paste this. This is also a functional component. I also like spacing them in a specific way. But if I were to, you have to name this one header specifically. And then I'm going to go ahead and put up here in the header, we'll do Doug tests site. And then we're going to go ahead and import that into our layout page. So this is the very baseline. And so everything has to be underneath this layout that's underneath this layout page needs to be inside the body of this here. So nothing can be outside this, to my understanding. Maybe there's something that could, but I put everything in here. And so the way you can do that is you just start typing header, and your app will automatically know that this header needs to be imported, that I had exported from here. So export by default this, so it just knows that, oh, this is the header you're probably looking for, and it'll autofill it. So now if we save this, then we go back to our app, you'll see Doug's test sites up there now. And this will be on every page because it's the header, and it's present above the children here, right? So if I go back even to the home page, boom, there we go. And I guess one thing we can do is just also add some links so that we can get between our pages. So one thing we can do, where's my header? We'll put this header here. We can do an A link, and we're going to do, actually, no, I think about it. Next.js has a link component, which we're going to import here. And this has some features. Mainly it's for just navigation features for how you navigate around a Next.js app. But you're going to want to always use this link component when you're linking around your app. And so we can go ahead and add things like the backslash, do home. And then we can do, I mean, our GitHub Copilot was like, hey, I know what you're trying to do. About. And then about company. Perfect. So now if we go back here, we can see home, about company. If we do boom, about company, home, nice. So this will allow us to link around our app a little easier. So where were we? We're gonna use style components. So in order to import a library, which you will do sometimes, you're gonna want to close your terminal and your active instance of your server, which is really what you're running here for your Node app. And then you're gonna want to do npm install. We're gonna do styled components. Boom. And because we're using TypeScript, we're also going to want the types for it. And you'll figure this out if you install a library and it's giving you a bunch of errors with TypeScript underlining it, then you're going to know that your types are not imported properly. And if you Google it or ask ChatGPT, it's going to tell you the same thing. But for styled components, you also look up styled components types. I have it already noted here. npm install types for styled components. Cool. So now that we have those installed, let's go ahead and do npm run dev. Actually, before that, there's one last thing I think you still need to import for Next.js to understand how to use styled components. Is you're going to go to your config, which this actually looks different than my app, but they must have changed it in the new one. Just to preface it with an M. I don't really know what the M means, but you're going to have these compiler options. So we're going to first dive into our next config and go into compiler, and we're going to add styled components true. And this is all it does right here. Boom. Save. Now we're going to do npm run dev. And so let's boot up our server again with styled components. And just to check that it's working, we'll go ahead and refresh. Cool. So now that we have that here, we're going to go ahead and close this out. We don't need it now. And we're going to do a new component, a new styled component specifically. And so a good one to start with is just a wrapper around your page so that you know, so that your app has a kind of baseline width and baseline like top padding. So if we went in here, we created a export const. So you're always going to want to export your component from here. Do wrapper. And then we're going to want to, it already knows what I'm doing, but I'm going to do styled. and you see styled is a styled component. I'm going to press enter in order to automatically import it. And then this is going to be a div component. So we're going to go ahead and create the div component. And then we're going to have it keeps wanting to auto populate it with things, but let's just do what it wants. Let's do a background color. We'll give it a background color so we know it's active. That's fine. We'll just do like an off-white. And then we're going to give it a padding. I like to give it a top padding of like 3%. And so 3% is going to be whatever the parent is, percentage of the parent or percentage of the current. And then we're going to, we're going to do padding, and then we'll do like a width of maybe like 75%. Sweet. And then another cool thing about styled components is I can just have my like nested values inside of this. So like, for example, my media queries can be right in this. And so a media query is essentially taking a look at what the size of the media is. So the max width, AKA making it responsive so that when you have a smaller screen size, it's going to scale down. So we're going to put here, let's say 900 pixels wide. This is a general good size, and we're going to change the width to then go to 90% so that it's more full. So we do that. We'll go ahead and copy the name here and what we have set up, and then we're going to go to a page. So let's go to our about page just to show that the wrapper is present. So we're going to import that wrapper around it. And you can see it automatically imports because when I did this, you can see that it, now press enter and it will automatically import it. Save. And if we go back to specifically the about page, we're going to get an error. So this is the first time that we've seen this use client directive is needed. So with Next.js, essentially you can read up on this a little bit, but if I Google Next.js client directive, rendering client components. So you want to keep your client components to be at the edges, and you can read up on Next.js here. A lot of your questions will be answered from this, but use client will be needed to be put at the top of your client components. And these client components are always going to be at the edge of kind of your app, because client components are things that the client can see and interact with unfettered. So server components are sitting on the server, and the client doesn't necessarily have full access to them. The server is sending that information to the client in a abstracted way, whereas the client component is just as is. So they could theoretically change certain things about it. And so React.js has these things called use state and use effect, which essentially need to be in a client component. So anytime you're using, that's what it's saying here, anytime you're using these React components like use state, it's going to need to be in a client component. And you'll get an error for that, just as we did here. And the way you fix it is by adding use client to whatever that leaf is on the outside. So in this case, the leaf is not this page necessarily, but rather this style component. So all of your style component pages or files will need to have this use client at the top. So you're just going to put that there, and that's going to fix our error. Boom. And so you look, we have this background color here, so you can actually see what it's doing there. And so if we see that change, the width change there, that's because when it hit 900, it's going to change the width. And so you're going to want to actually center this here. And one of the ways I do that is by doing margin auto 0. So if we go here and we just set the margin top and bottom, that's what this stands for. The first one is top and bottom. If you only have two variables here, then that's going to be, this first 0 is going to be your top and your bottom, and this is going to be your left and your right. So it's going to auto margin the left and the right, which is going to center whatever the components are, like this, into it. And this is just something centering a div that you'll learn, or now you have learned about it. So I actually don't like what it gave the background color, but it does give you a good understanding of what's going on here. So another thing we could do is create a header component too, so that this is more centered. I mean, in this situation, it might work, but maybe we're going to want to have like the links over on the right and this on the left. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to leave that test there. And instead, or not rename, we're going to want to create a new file, and we're going to name this header.ts. Sweet. And so we're going to do export const header container. And we'll go ahead and close this here. Oh my God. Cool. And so what we're going to want to import styled. So you see, if I just backspace the last letter, put it in again, it will automatically tell me what I'm trying to import. And it's trying to give me some recommendations that we're not going to follow. So one thing we can do is we can set, there's a lot of things we can do here, but I'm going to put the H1 tag, which is going to be that title, and I'm going to have it float left. And then let's just do an ID of links so that we know what we're targeting here. And we're going to do float right. So this isn't going to do anything yet because the header component isn't imported in our header here. But if I were to do header container, boom. And then we go ahead and give this, the links area, a ID links. We put these in here and we save. Oh, look what I forgot to do again. I forgot to do use client. So we're going to have to go here, use client, save. And now we have a little bit more of a styling. Obviously this isn't centered, which there's a lot of things we could do. One thing we could do is do a flex and vertical align or vertical align, but we'll just leave it how it is for now. Not a big deal. We can put I like to put a HR or horizontal rule places just to make this a little cleaner. Let's see if that changes things. That's at the wrong size because we have floats going on and that's going to screw everything up. One thing you could do is you could do boom. And then I'm going to put this here. And so this is also, in case you don't know, this is a fragment component. So you can wrap this in a div as well if you wanted to, but these like empty brackets here is just like a baseless component. So it's not even an HTML component. It's just like something you can wrap. It says you can't have, if you're returning, a return value needs to return one thing. It can't return like this and then this. So you need to always wrap it. And this is what TypeScript helps with. TypeScript will tell us that this is a problem before we even save. And it even highlights this red so we know there's a problem. And you can always hover over it and it will tell you. You can do a quick fix, but I'm not going to do that because I know what's going on. Like that. Cool. So that should maybe do something. Wait, oh my gosh. Okay, well, I honestly, floating is not a good way to do it. So we're going to be quick about this and we're just not going to do it right now. I don't want to get too deep into that. But, so we have this set up. We can give a background color of that. That'd be a good way to differentiate between the two. So we'll go here. We'll give this whole thing a background color of, I don't even know what that 333 is. We'll see. Nothing. Doesn't look like it did anything. We'll give it a light blue. And it's not applying anything. Why is that? But maybe because light blue is not actually a color, it would be blue. But it was. No, it's not. I don't know what it's doing. Why it's not applying that. That's okay. Not a big deal. Maybe we'll cut that out. Maybe not. Just to show that what reality of things are. Yeah, I don't know why it's not applying the background color. But regardless, we have our style components here. It's encompassing, it's wrapping any of our components. So this is styled within it. So this just pretty much tells us what styles to apply to the items within it. Sweet. And so, I mean, that's pretty much how I structure my apps. There's a lot of ways you can, this also should have been in main. I like to put that in main, and you can move things like that. And then it'll give you the prompt to say, would you like to automatically update the imports? and it will do that for you so that you don't have to, which it doesn't look like it did here, maybe because it wasn't saved. But you see TypeScript will tell me that this is imported wrong. So we're going to go ahead and import it from our main instead of our misc. I put it in the wrong folder. And misc might be like some random components, like a counter that you might have in here or something. And lib might be like your database connections or something like that. So your files for that. So everybody has a different way of kind of organizing their files and their folders for their apps. There's no perfect way to do it, but Next.js has a certain structure that you generally need to follow, such as under your app folder, there needs to be these sub folders that will be your paths. And then there's other things like the public and some files you'll need, but I think this is a general good way to get started. So from here, let's go ahead and just show how to get this onto the internet. So if we, with Vercel, you can go ahead and let's just make sure this actually is, yeah, cool. So this is all good to go. Let's say this, all of these changes are good to go. So we're going to do first changes so that other people know what happened. And then here you can say added header or set up Next.js app, something like that. And we're going to commit. We're going to go ahead and publish this. We're going to keep it private. Sometimes you can keep it public. I can put it into different organizations, but for now, we'll just keep this private. Just a test description and then publish. So that will take a second. And then once that's done, we can go ahead and go over to Vercel so that we can see what it would look like on the internet. So you're going to want to create a Vercel account, first of all. And once you create a Vercel account, you'll be brought to this dashboard. Once you're at the dashboard, you will go up here and you will create, you're going to want to create a new project, create new project. So once you create a new project, you'll be, once you're in this screen, you'll be prompted with this. And so we can just directly import our project from GitHub. So if we do import here, and then we switch to my personal account, which is what we saved it under, you can see my Doug test is sitting there ready to import. So we're going to go ahead and import it here. Once we have it imported, or once we have it clicked there, we're going to have, there's a couple options here. And then the main thing you're going to want is, let me check my README really quick. We're going to have a specific setting so that it properly, oh wait, no, this is, sorry, that's for a different setup, which I'll cover in another video. So the preset's Next.js, it automatically knew that based on the file structure. And that's it. And you can add environment variables here that you might need for your APIs or your connections that need to be private and aren't going to be available. Remember, we're going to exclude these env files from the GitHub repo. So if someone else is downloading your repository, they're not going to have these files or these variables. So you're going to want to store them here, and Vercel will store them. So then you can just run a command and you pull those onto your computer. But for now, we're just going to do deploy. And I don't know actually how long this is going to take. I might have to cut this out. I'd rather not do any editing, which might happen with this. Yeah, I'm just going to sit here. Hopefully it's quick, because it's small. This should mimic this exact setup, but at an actual URL so you can share it with people. And you can also connect your domain, a custom domain to it. We have a build log. We have an issue. Error. I have something no unescaped under company about page. So we can go there and see what that is. Company, of course maybe it's this, or it was this. About company, what's not going to be, let's just do about the company. I don't know. We'll do that. And we'll try again. We'll do, of course I failed on this. So regardless, of course, this fails, but this is going to happen. When you deploy something, it's going to catch that something that your TypeScript didn't catch, but the build will catch. And so we're going to go ahead and go back to this, and what's cool about Vercel is each time you push now to the main branch, it's going to look at this main branch and test. And then if it passes everything after I push, it's going to automatically push that to the main app server so that it's live on your production side. So your main is always going to be production. But when you're working with other people, you're not going to want to work on the main branch because that's where like the production app would sit. So you're going to want to create a new branch, name it something like Doug's Changes, and then work in that branch that's connected to the main branch, up to date with what's going on in the main branch. Edit things in your new branch that you created. And then every time you're ready to merge with the main and you're comfortable with things not breaking your app on production, you're going to choose a branch to merge with main. You're going to choose the branch that you have been making changes to, create a merge commit. It's going to combine the two. It will tell you if there's any issues with overlap, and then you have to fix those, like which change you would rather keep that overlapped. And then you're going to commit, and those changes will then be merged. And this is usually something you want to take careful consideration with because it could really screw up your app. So let's see if this is done. So every time I push to here, it should pop up under deployments. Sorry. And it looks like it errored out again. What was the issue? Page.tsx also has something. This is the baseline app. I don't know why it doesn't like that, but it's definitely just that apostrophe. I haven't had that happen before, but that's okay. You can also, instead of having to push this each time as its own commit, something that's actually better to do is to close your server. And then with the Vercel CLI, which I think I told you to install, regardless, if you don't have the Vercel CLI, you should download it. Just Google, nope, I didn't mean to open that. Just do npm IG, so you can just copy that, put that into your terminal here, just like I'm doing this, and then run it. I already have it, so I'm not going to do it. But once you have that, you can do a lot of things. The main thing I like to do is Vercel -- prod, which is production, and that will push your current code to production and deploy it to production. If you just did Vercel, it's going to deploy it to what's called a preview environment, which the preview environment isn't production, but it's your like test environment that is live so that other people can visit it at a link. So we're going to do set up and deploy. Sorry, we haven't even linked this. So you're going to want to run Vercel link, and that's going to do the same thing that's going on here. It's going to prompt you with the same thing because this doesn't even know what Vercel project I'm like pushing it to yet. Because what's connected is the GitHub. This GitHub on the back end is connected to the Vercel project, but my actual local app isn't quite connected to it. So we're going to do Douglas James's projects. Found, so it already sees that it matches the name. It's going to go ahead and link to it, and you're going to do yes. And now it's going to deploy. So I know this takes like a second. And while I'm looking at this, I might as well just make sure I didn't accidentally put Doug's in multiple ones. I didn't, which is good. So we'll give it a sec. You always click this and see it live, this inspect link. And this will just bring you to pretty much the same page as this was, but its own setup. You can see what's going on, how it's building it, and what it's exactly looking at. And hopefully this one passes. And assuming everything worked properly, that first deploy that I messed up on would have no mistakes, and it would just deploy right off, and it would give you like a success message and a link, just like this probably will. Looks like it's ready. It looks like it's all screwed up there. Well, that's fine. You can see there's domains that it's saying that we can go to. There's two here. There's a preview link, and then this is the main one. But if we were just to go back and just pretend like we're just at our main app, our project. you can see, boom, ready. It was deployed by me and the domain that it's at. So Doug Test at Vercel app. It doesn't look great, but that's okay. It's because of float. I shouldn't have used floats. Floats are usually give you ugly outputs like this because it takes it out of the DOM. But you can see our same setup is here, our same ugly setup, and it's at a live link. And if I went to an incognito window, typed it in, it's going to be here too. So that's pretty much it. If I were to go to the GitHub page for this, which I usually do, just do this, right click, view on GitHub, you can see there was a failure on the last one 5 minutes ago. If I were to go, which, oh, that's because I didn't actually put this. But if I were to deploy this, that would pop up there as a success, which I'll just do that really quick. We'll name it fixed error. I don't know. You'd be more specific than I am right now. And then this will pop up here, give it a little check, just as we did for the other deployment. But it's just kind of nice to be able to see here when things are, see it's already pending, when things are properly running. So there's a couple ways it's going to check. And these deployments will show here, the production failed. Let's let that succeed. So Vercel is pretty nice for all this stuff, but there's a lot of things you can do with Vercel. A couple things that I do is if you go under the storage tab, you can start to link up your like a database. So you can create a database, and I use Prisma to connect to these Postgres databases. And I'm going to create a whole tutorial on how to do that. But you can have a blob, which is in beta, but it's essentially just files that you can put in here. So PDFs or images typically, and you can easily upload and delete them from that database, which is great. There's also analytics that are built in, which can get kind of expensive if it's a high traffic site. Obviously logs for a live setup to see how people are interacting with your site. And there's a firewall feature that's actually pretty new, but that's just for protection. So if we go back here, let's see if it's done. Of course it's not. Oh, it is. Boom, success. And you'll see that here that 2 deployments that, or these other ones failed, but this production one I went through, which is great. So that is pretty much it. Not the most cohesive tutorial. I did this in one shoot. I don't think I'm going to plan on editing it, but hopefully that's clear. If you have any questions, please ask me. I hopefully have all the answers. Thanks for watching. Bye.